This is Billy Batson, star reporter for station WIZZ-TV. He has been picked by the aged wizard SHAZAM to carry on the wizard's lifelong crusade against crime and the forces of evil. When Billy speaks the wizard's name,
SHAZAM!
Billy becomes Captain Marvel, mighty champion, combining the wisdom of Solomon, the strength of Hercules, the stamina of Atlas, the power of Zeus, the courage of Achilles, and the speed of Mercury.
This is Comic Geek Speak, episode 1738, Spotlight on SHAZAM in the Bronze Age.
Part 2.
I'm Adam Murdo.
And I'm Ian Levinstein. And we are back with part 2 of Captain Marvel in the Bronze Age. Where we last left off, it was issue 26 of the SHAZAM series from the 1970s. And Murd is going to go ahead and tell you all about that and a lot more for about the next 2 hours or so. So, Murd, go ahead and take it away, shall we?
Okay, so moving back to the SHAZAM series. Issue number 26. All right, this is where we really see the influence of the SHAZAM TV show come into play. This is where Billy Batson is sent off by Mr. Morris of Wiz TV on a cross-country trek in a custom RV with a lightning bolt on the front grille, just like the one TV's Michael Gray rides around in on the TV show, to record little human interest spots, like a bicentennial series on Youth in America for Station Wiz. I mean, that's the pretext anyway, that we see very little of Billy doing that in the ensuing issues. It's just an excuse to get him in the RV and send him traveling cross-country. Mm-hmm. And to accompany him as a chaperone and mentor, to coin a phrase, we get Uncle Marvel, because as we've seen earlier, he's already a Station Wiz employee, so now he's coming along to drive the RV and handle some of the equipment. And he's also affected a safari suit and a mustache, very much like what actor Les Tremaine is seen to have as the character mentor on the Saturday morning SHAZAM show. All utterly coincidental, of course. Not foisted on Bridwell at all. And also foisted on Bridwell is a device called the Eterniphone, which is a machine that old SHAZAM gives Billy. It resembles an upside-down colander with little colored buttons on it. And he can use this Eterniphone to call on either SHAZAM himself or any of the 6 SHAZAM elders for advice, which is not something that Billy has ever done in any of the SHAZAM comics before, but it's somewhat similar to what Billy was seen to do in the TV series, so Bridwell was told, have Billy do this.
You know, he's been doing it the entire time. It's just it was always off camera. I mean, come on.
I don't know why Bridwell didn't think of that himself, actually.
Yeah, right?
But anyway, Bridwell wasn't complaining too much because he was just happy to continue to write Captain Marvel in some form. And besides which, I mean, this sending Billy out on the road is kind of the ideal way for Bridwell to, A, do this Tour of Cities sequel that he's been dying to do for years anyway. B, tie into the bicentennial, since Billy's visiting all these great American landmarks. And C, tie into the TV show all in a single fell swoop. So, worked out beautifully. So the first stop on this tour of cities in SHAZAM number 26, Savannah. He's the main bad guy here. He just barely, like a classic serial villain, he just barely escapes capture at the end of almost all of these issues and moves on to the next city. So first stop, Washington, D.C. Savannah has projected the Capitol building back in time. Congress is missing, and nobody in 1976, not Washington, D.C., seems to care. In fact, there's celebrations in the streets. But Captain Marvel can travel through time, after all, through the use of the Rock of Eternity, and he saves the day. And Sivana gets away and moves on to the next city. And that happens to be Philadelphia.
Yay.
That makes me very happy. So Shazam number 27, Sivana dusts off an old plot device that he had left around from the early Golden Age. Last seen in Captain Marvel Adventures number 20, 1943, Sivana uses his reincarnation machine, which looks like a chrome-plated coffin with some tubes and pipes coming out of it. All he needs to do is put in some kind of genetic material, and he can create a fully realized clone of any historical figure he wants, complete with clothing and memories intact. And so he conjures up some colonial-era criminals to help him wreck Philadelphia. They run interference for him while he rigs up the Liberty Bell with an atomic detonator so that when Captain Marvel rings it as a part of the bicentennial celebrations, it'll blow up the whole city. And Chris would appreciate this. The people he conjures up are actual historical figures, like Edward Teach, Blackbeard, and Anne Bonny, the female pirate, and some other lesser-known figures, even Benedict Arnold, who ends up turning traitor on Sivana and ratting him out to Captain Marvel in the end. Go figure.
Now, was this the replica of the Liberty Bell, or what? Because I mean, I know that. I know that they made another one at one point, and it cracked just like the old one. But I guess this must have been, that one that they were ringing, because the other one don't ring no more.
Yeah, and that's exactly the kind of thing that Bridwell would usually footnote.
Yeah,
just to slip a little extra tidbit of information he happens to know into the story, but he didn't really specify which bell it was.
Oh, well,
just a Liberty Bell, an atomic Liberty Bell at that. But anyway, Captain Marvel gets some help from a surprise guest star, actually, to beat Sivana at his own game. A Golden Age superhero who happens to have abilities similar to Sivana's reincarnation machine. And that is Kid Eternity. And his supernatural chaperone, Mr. Keeper, his heavenly helper. And these are both characters that actually, they were not Fawcett characters back in the Golden Age. The Quality Comics Company introduced them in the pages of their series Hit Comics. And they had a good long run back in the 40s. They had not been seen in original stories in comics since 1949. DC had published a few reprints, which I think Bridwell had as much to do with as anybody. He was kind of a fan of the Kid Eternity character. And Kid Eternity's deal was he was a kid who was killed before his time as a result of a Nazi U-boat, I think, blowing up the boat he was on. And due to some kind of heavenly clerical error, he was sent to heaven by mistake. And as a compensation for this premature demise of his, he was given the superhuman power to come back to Earth and fight bad guys, including, of course, the Nazis, by using the magic word eternity, which allows him to either make himself immaterial, he could become a ghost at will, or he could summon the ghosts of any historical figure or mythological or fictional character he wanted into the flesh just by saying his magic word eternity. And so that's exactly what he does to help out Captain Marvel in Philadelphia here by conjuring some good guy historical figures to battle the bad guy historical figures. And it's just, this is not the last we'll see of Kid Eternity either. Bridwell was a fan, as I said, and he had plans involving both Kid Eternity and the Marvels, which we'll see come to fruition later on down the line.
And we also saw Kid Eternity, never read Grant Morrison's Kid Eternity Vertigo comic, but...
yeah, I haven't either.
Yeah, but he gave a shot at that. And also Kid Eternity was a member of the Teen Titans for a while, and in the mid-2000s, if memory serves.
Yes. All of which is, of course, the post-crisis Kid Eternity.
Yes, it is.
But this is E. Nelson Bridwell having fun with the Golden Age version of the character, which, by rights, since he was a Quality Comics character, should have been a denizen of Earth X, or at least Earth 2, but Bridwell saw good reason to place him and his assistant, Mr. Keeper, on Earth S, for reasons we'll get into a little later. Okay, Shazam number 28, The Return of Black Adam is the title, and that's pretty much the plot also. Sivana escapes at the end of number 27 and hightails it to Boston, where he uses the resurrection machine to bring back from the dead Teth Adam, alias Chem Adam, alias Black Adam. Now, this is a character very well known to comic fans of today, but he was kind of a deep cut back in 1976 or 77, whatever year it was by this point. He had made, he's thought today to be a very important part of the Captain Marvel mythos, but he made exactly one appearance back in the Golden Age.
Yep.
And that was in Marvel Family #1 in late 1945. And thanks to Captain Marvel tricking him into saying his magic word, reverting to human form and turning to dust, he died in that story. And then he was not seen again until this story. So Sivana uses his reincarnation machine to bring Black Adam back. Since those colonial crooks failed so badly against the Captain, Sivana thought, hey, let's bring up somebody in Captain Marvel's weight class. And Black Adam suits the bill, and he immediately destroys the reincarnation machine to make sure that Sivana can't return Black Adam to the clay from whence he came. And then he sets on the rampage across Boston. He's got world domination on his mind. Captain Marvel battles into a standstill, and Black Adam is kind of forced to play on Captain Marvel's respect for American history in order to get a leg up on him in the battle. When he finds he can't beat Captain Marvel himself, he instead starts destroying various Boston landmarks, so that Captain Marvel is sort of obsessive-compulsively driven to stop and repair these major patriotic monuments, and giving Black Adam time to get away. In the course of this story, we actually also learn the names of the 6 Egyptian gods who form the acronym of SHAZAM for Black Adam, because he first got his powers 5,000 years ago, before some of the Greco-Roman deities that Billy Batson's Captain Marvel are empowered by were even widely worshipped or known. So SHAZAM shows us a big, full-page spread of a giant piece of wall art that spells out the 6 Egyptian deities that Black Adam invokes for his powers. And they are, in case you were wondering, Shu, Hershef, Amon, Zehuti, Anpu, and Menthu. That list would be slightly revised in the post-crisis years, but according to E. Nelson Bridwell, that is what Black Adam's SHAZAM stands for. Well. So it's a nice big battle between Captain Marvel and Black Adam, and in the end, Uncle Marvel outsmarts Black Adam for the second time. This time he doesn't turn to dust, but Captain Marvel does hit him once Black Adam's reverted to human form with his famous amnesia punch, so that Black Adam can't remember who he is or what magic word he needs to say to cause more trouble. So Black Adam is back in canon and back in present-day continuity, and he will get several more appearances before the Bronze Age is over.
One of the most important reappearances, I'd say, period. I mean, like you said, everybody seems to, believe that Black Adam was this important character in the Golden Age, but nope. Not until the 70s, really, and he really never went away after that, and he became one of my favorite characters, later on in comics history, and without this issue, wouldn't have happened.
Yep, you're probably right. He might have remained forgotten if E. Nelson Bridwell hadn't thought to exhume him.
Exactly.
Yep. But, of course, he's still just kind of a two-dimensional baddie at this point. He doesn't gain the sort of warped, regal and noble aspect that prompted so many JSA readers to love him as a character until much later.
Yep.
So let's see. The Tour of Cities continues in number 29 in Buffalo, which is, for my money, one of the funniest issues of this run. And Bridwell was kind of known for his humor. He got his start writing for Mad Magazine, and he created a couple of well-known DC humor concepts like The Inferior Five and Angel and the Ape. So this issue is just kind of a madcap romp in Buffalo, New York, as Ibac and Aunt Minerva join forces with Dr. Sivana, who's planning to blow up Niagara Falls. Meanwhile, Aunt Minerva she's man-hungry, as I mentioned earlier, so she's chasing Ibac to make him her 6th husband. He's running away from her while trying to catch up with Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel has been swamped with little odd jobs that he can do in exchange for charitable donations to Uncle Marvel's charity, SHAZAM, Inc., and Uncle Marvel gets into the act, too, suiting up as Uncle Marvel. The SHAZAM elder Solomon gives Ibac dating advice, i.e. how to avoid dating Aunt Minerva. It's all just a little bit crazy. And it all starts off with a guest appearance by Satan.
Good old Satan, my buddy.
Yeah. Our good old buddy pal. Yeah, well, he actually appears as Prince Lucifer. They don't call him Satan outright because I guess they're still trying to keep the Captain Marvel series squeaky clean for younger readers. But later on in the Bronze Age, we will get Satan as Satan. But here he's just a guy in a tuxedo and a cape with red skin and horns and a little beard, and he says to Ibak, look, I gave you your powers years ago. You're not living up to my expectations. I'm going to ramp up your powers. And we do get to see him trade a few blows with Captain Marvel, and Cap remarks, I actually felt those. You're more powerful than ever. But still, Ibak spends most of his energy running away from Aunt Minerva in this issue. So Prince Lucifer's time was kind of wasted, showing up at the beginning of this issue. But yeah, it's kind of it's a fun story anyway. And Sivana gets away at the end of it, of course. And we see him next in issue number 30 in Pittsburgh. Now here we get yet another little tease of Superman and Captain Marvel dust-up. Superman actually appears on the cover, but he's silver in color, and it's made kind of obvious that this isn't, at least they do that much. They tell us right on the cover that it's not really Superman that Cap is fighting, it's a robot that Sivana has built. Sivana finds a Superman comic book and learns from that about the existence of Superman, and so he comes up with a kind of a robot brain that he can insert into vats of molten steel that can cause that steel to take on whatever kind of T-1000 shape he wants it to. So he turns the steel into a whole menagerie of different robotic animals. There's another robot based on a tall tale hero called Joe Magaratz. So here's Bridwell showing off his knowledge of American mythology again. Magaratz was supposedly like the steelworkers' version of Paul Bunyan. You know, he was supposed to figure into tall tales that steelworkers told each other, especially among Croatian immigrants. Although, from what I've read elsewhere, there's some debate as to whether or not Joe Magaratz is an authentic folktale character. He might be an example of fake lore, just a character that some writer made up and passed off as an authentic oral tradition. But whatever, he makes for a cool character in this story. He's just talking in broken Croatian English and beating up on Captain Marvel while trying to destroy the Pittsburgh steel mill where he was created. So we get to see Captain Marvel facing off against him and the robot Superman and a whole mess of animal robots. It's more than he can handle himself, so he rounds up the entire Marvel family, not just Marion Jr., but the heretofore unseen in the Bronze Age Lieutenant Marvels as well. So it takes all of them to get these rampaging robots back in line, and they even sing a little song while they're doing it.
What do they sing?
Well, it's... don't make me cite you the lyrics.
Oh, I'm not.
But they actually did sing a song together in an early Golden Age story, and Bridwell just kind of based his version off of that. He expanded the lyrics and had it go on for several pages.
I'll in my head, it'll just be hi ho, it's off to work we go. So
that's not far from it, actually. It's like Marvel's here, Marvel's there, Marvel's everywhere is the opening stanza.
Well, I was on the money. There we go.
You sure as hell were. My gosh. Okay, so there's another fun romp in Pittsburgh, and this time they apprehend Sivana, and he stays caught. So the role of recurring villain is passed on to another character, as we'll see in Shazam number 31. So here, Billy and Uncle Marvel roll into Columbus, Ohio, a metropolis somewhat underrepresented in comics. But there they meet up with another long-lost Fawcett hero who did not get to appear in that Justice League story we talked about a while ago, Minuteman. Bridwell was regretful he wasn't able to work Minuteman in. He wanted to team up Minuteman with the Justice Society's Our Man.
But he didn't have the time?
Nope. Tick-tock, tick-tock. No, but we do get to see Minuteman here. His secret identity is Jack Weston. He's long since retired from heroics, and now he runs a restaurant in the German Village neighborhood of Columbus, Ohio. And Billy and Uncle Marvel are sitting down to dinner with him to reminisce about old Golden Age times, I guess, when the restaurant is attacked by the Rainbow Squad. Now, the Rainbow Squad are basically a superpowered roller derby team that the villain of this story, Mr. Wonderful, has rounded up. He gets these 6 disgruntled malcontent women specifically women. And he hooks them up to this rainbow machine he's developed. He puts in a little bit of like a cell sample from Captain Marvel, and it imbues each of these 6 women with a power aura that lets them duplicate one of Captain Marvel's 6 main powers: wisdom, strength, etc. And then he gives them color-coordinated costumes, and he sends them to rob Jack Weston's restaurant. Not to get the money, of course. It's just because he knew somehow that Billy would be there. And this was part of his scheme to eliminate Captain Marvel. He instructed one of the 6 Rainbow Squadsters to, if possible, corner Captain Marvel. And this particular squad member was named Dynamol. And she represents power, as in the power of Zeus. She can project any energy form she can imagine. Atomic, solar, you name it. So she's supposed to hit Captain Marvel with a lightning blast to revert him to Billy. And eventually that is what she does, and she's able to capture him. But this is not before, on the initial attack of the Rainbow Squad, when it proves fruitless to try to take on Captain Marvel physically. They instead resort to a Plan B attack that Mr. Wonderful has told them about, and that is they flirt with him. So this is a callback to the Golden Age that we have not yet seen in the. This is the first mention of Captain Marvel's powerful gynophobia. We've seen several times in Golden Age stories that Cap gets very nervous when aggressive, attractive women fawn all over him. He just doesn't know how to react, and he basically freaks out and runs away. And that's exactly what happens when the Rainbow Squad members make like Bobby Soxers and.
Hey.
Yeah, so Captain Marvel then finds himself wandering the streets of Columbus, fretting and soul-searching over this problem of his. Why do I react to women this way? What shall I do? And that's when Dynamol tracks him down and zaps him with lightning and turns him back into Billy and captures him. And then it's Minuteman to the rescue. He puts on his Stars and Stripes costume. He was like the resident patriotic character of Fawcett's Golden Age. And he tracks Dynamol and Billy back to Mr. Wonderful's lair, and he distracts the Rainbow Squad just long enough for Billy to work himself loose of his gag and say Shazam, and then it's all downhill from there. And it turns out, big reveal at the end here, that Mr. Wonderful is, I think the whole Rainbow Squad and Mr. Wonderful thing is kind of inspired by Charlie's Angels, which in 1977 would have been a very popular television program.
Sure.
But Mr. Wonderful, the Charlie figure here, turns out to be just an android piloted by Mr. Mind.
Well,
so this is our. Well,
I think you know, for a name like Mr. Wonderful to actually just be an android does not surprise me for some reason. I don't know why.
You sort of expect the ideal man to be just like an artificial being, don't you?
Right, exactly. Yeah, it was too good to be true. That's it. Of course, he was just a worm in a machine. Right.
It's also the first time I think we ever see Mr. Mind riding around in another being's head, which kind of became his M.O. In later decades.
Mm-hmm.
Also, speaking of Mr. Mind, this is the issue where we finally get the little 2-panel explanation for how Mr. Mind is alive after being executed back in the 40s. Turns out his species of alien worm things are immune to electric shock. Sufficient voltage will just put them into a death-like state. So he wasn't actually killed when he was sent to the electric chair back in the 40s. He was just put into a temporary coma. He awoke in the taxidermist's shop, and he then hypnotized the taxidermist somehow into stuffing a different worm instead and putting Mr. Mind's little radio speaker and glasses on that other worm. And then Mr. Mind went into hiding for 20 years.
You know, I'm so glad that we had to wait 30 issues for that explanation. I think
right?
I think it was absolutely worth the wait in every single way.
Oh, yes. Just totally equal to the buildup.
Oh, yeah. No question about it. Also, definitely a phobia that I'd never heard of before, Murd. Now that you stated it. What was it called again? Gynophobia? Was that?
I think that's what it's called clinically,
okay.
Yeah. Like GYNO, that's kind of the combining form from the Greek word for woman.
Right. Yeah. Wow. Okay. All right. I'm putting that into use, and if anybody asks me, yes, I will put it to them in a sentence.
Yes, I'm sure they will appreciate that.
Yes.
All right. Now we're kind of running to the end of the tour of cities here. And we're also coming to the end of the run of Shazam as its own monthly or bi-monthly series. In issue number 32, the RV pulls up to Detroit, where Billy meets up with Mr. Talkie Tawny. He's decided he's going to become a pro baseball player, and what team would appeal more to him than the Detroit Tigers?
Wah, wah.
Yeah. So he tries out for the team, and he makes it. I mean, I guess for the freak factor, if nothing else, I guess, for the same reason Taranga Leela got to pitch for the New York Mets.
Exactly.
So we get Mr. Talkie Tawny playing baseball, and just in time for Mr. Mind, who escaped at the end of number 31, to show up with a team of alien all-stars. And he challenges the Detroit Tigers to a baseball game for the honor of the planet Earth. And hijinks ensue. That's the art in this issue and the one following it is provided by somebody named Tenny Henson. Now, this person's art is not well known to me. The only thing that I know that he or she had done prior to this was a Shazam coloring book. So at least Henson had a little bit of prior experience with the characters. So Tenny Henson got to take a little 2-issue fill-in here.
Yeah.
The designs for the Alien All-Stars are kind of reminiscent of like Jack Davis, who's a well-known artist for Mad Magazine and elsewhere. He's the guy who drew the movie poster for the Bad News Bears movie at about this same time. So that's probably why that influence shows up in these freaky alien athletes that he drew.
Tenny Henson is a Filipino artist, actually. And it looks like he mostly worked on horror books. That's his. That seemed to be his MO. He had a whole bunch of stuff for weird mystery tales and weird war tales and stuff like that back in the early 70s. So that seems to be what his main work was on outside of this.
Perfect choice, then, to draw a bunch of weirdo aliens.
Yes, indeed. Yep.
As Chris would say, Ian, that was clutch. Thank you very much for providing that info.
And thank you, Internet, for giving me the just right amount of time to type on the right page.
All right, so Mr. Mind is foiled there. And then he turns up again in Shazam number 33, this time in Indianapolis, where he's bringing along another long-unseen Captain Marvel foe who did actually appear in that Justice League story we mentioned, Mr. Atom. And he's the atomic-powered robot with a Madon for humankind. But this is his first appearance in the actual Shazam comic. Mr. Mind has formed a pact with him and has kind of altered his robot body into a race car. And he challenges Captain Marvel to a race. The World's Mightiest Race is the title of the story, at the Indy 500. And Captain Marvel rises to that occasion by putting together... Well, he has to ride around in a vehicle. He can't just use his natural speed of Mercury to beat Mr. Atom in this race. So he hires a bunch of local teenagers to help him build a lightning-powered Shazamobile, which runs on the same magic lightning that empowers Cap himself. And at the wheel of this unlikely vehicle, he is able to win the World's Mightiest Race against Mr. Mind and Mr. Atom. But being villains, they don't honor the arrangement, and Mr. Atom puts his own body back together, and we get a quick slugfest between Mr. Atom and Captain Marvel at the end of the story.
Well, they needed some sort of merchandise, so why not build a car?
Yeah, if there can be a supermobile, one of the few superhero vehicles that can punch a guy, as our friend Bill Dowdy likes to say, why not a Shazamobile?
Yep, why not?
And that is more or less the end of the Tour of Cities and the end of the Saturday morning Shazam-inspired series. It's all. I think it's also the last issue of the run of Shazam as a DC TV comic. And it's also, funnily enough, the last issue reprinted in this DC Showcase volume I've been talking about. It goes only as far as issue number 33. Now, the Shazam series lasted only 2 more issues after that. 34 and 35. They could very easily have just gone the whole hog and thrown those 2 issues' contents into the Showcase volume, but they chose not to. I guess at some point, maybe if the first volume had sold well enough, they would have gone ahead and done a second Showcase Presents Shazam, reprinting some of the world's finest comic stories. And they would have started that, I guess, with these last 2 issues of the Shazam Monthly, but I guess they decided to cut it off there just because there is such a sharp, radical, one might say desperate change of tone between Shazam number 33 and Shazam number 34, cover dated March, April 1978. Now we're starting to get into territory where most of the comics we'll be talking about are stuff that have not been reprinted anywhere, and as you have let us know here, Ian, are also not available digitally through DC.
Yep. Yeah, it's definitely a blind spot that I'd love to see, show up on the internet at some point, or show up in some sort of collection. And like you said, hopefully it's because Captain Marvel is back in the public eye, although of course his name is not Captain Marvel anymore. Then maybe they'll actually get around to doing so here. And by the way, just to add one more quick thing on Tenny Henson, he became an animator and was known for background designs on a bunch of animated series, including X-Men the Animated Series and Animaniacs and Tiny Toons. So, and He-Man for that matter. So just wanted to throw that out there for you.
That explains much. Thank you, Ian.
All right.
I thought he probably sought employment in other media. That happened to a lot of people who drew comics briefly and decided it wasn't for them.
Yep.
But yeah, I thought his work might be familiar to me without my knowledge elsewhere in the world.
Yep.
All right, so Shazam number 34. I forgot to mention, with issue number 32, Joe Orlando relinquished editorial control to Jack C. Harris, who was getting a lot of books dropped in his editorial lap in the late 70s, as it turns out. So he would then sort of guide the Marvel family's fortunes for the rest of the Bronze Age. So here we go with number 34, though. We're in the fall of 1977 now. This is right around the time when the last round of reruns of the Shazam live-action TV show were ending on CBS. And any desire to continue to tie into that TV series had pretty much evaporated at DC. So they were trying another somewhat last-ditch effort to change the tone and appeal to modern reader sensibilities. And things get just a little bit darker as a result. Issue number 34 has guest art by Alan Weiss, and with some pretty heavy and dark inks by Joe Rubenstein. And it's still being written by E. Nelson Bridwell, though. So the Tour of Cities comes to an end in Chicago, where the story begins with landmines going off in the middle of the interstate highway that Billy and Uncle Marvel are taking into town. And Billy decides to, it disables the RV, so Uncle Marvel is left behind. And so he's effectively written out of the strip for a bit. Billy, as Captain Marvel flies ahead to Chicago to investigate further. He eventually learns that another long-lost Captain Marvel enemy, Captain Nazi, a villain who probably wouldn't have suited the more kid-friendly tone that this series had taken to this point. Yeah. Captain Nazi makes his reappearance. Turns out he has put himself into suspended animation years ago, about the same time that everybody else was up in the suspendium globe. He did some quick calculations and discovered that that suspendium globe would not stay in orbit around the Earth forever. So for some reason, he decided to put himself into suspended animation using his own equipment and time it so that he would be released from his capsule around the same time everybody in the suspendium globe would be re-released. I'm not sure, again, why he decided to do that when he would probably have more luck setting up his Fourth Reich or whatever his endgame is while there are no Marvel family members to fight. But anyway, he's back in action. He set up his own little neo-Nazi clique in the Sears Tower, of all places, and being fairly public about it, too. For the first time, we actually get an origin for Captain Nazi. We learn that his real name is Albrecht Krieger, that his father, Sigmund, was a scientist, and he developed a miracle food that he had fed little Albrecht from birth, which resulted in his gaining superhuman abilities and becoming kind of the ideal Aryan male. And proud Papa Sigmund then presented Captain Nazi to Hitler to act as his personal super agent and opposite number to the American superheroes, Captain Marvel, Bullet Man, etc. So we never really known that much background about Captain Nazi before, but E. Nelson Bridwell gives it to us in this issue. And Captain Nazi rigs up some kind of force field around Chicago so that Billy can't summon the magic lightning to turn into Captain Marvel, so he has to put in a long-distance call to Freddie Freeman to become Captain Marvel Jr. and fly out to Chicago to help. The problem is, Jr. hates Captain Nazi with a fiery passion. Nazi was really more an arch enemy of Cap Jr. than he ever was of Captain Marvel Sr. It was because Captain Nazi figured in Captain Marvel Jr.'s origin. He's the one who killed Freddie Freeman's grandfather and crippled Freddie Freeman, which sent him on his journey to becoming Captain Marvel Jr.
Oh boy!
So when Freddie learns that Captain Nazi is still alive, he kind of goes a little berserk, and Captain Marvel Sr. barely talks him back from the edge and prevents him from beating Captain Nazi to death. So it's all a little dark and angsty and late 70s-ish, and very distinct from the Shazam storytelling that had taken place in the 70s to that point. Also happening in this issue, Bridwell starts to have Cap and Billy begin to forget that there are two separate personalities, which is always the way the two of them had been written to that point. So I guess Bridwell had it in mind to sort of slowly create an identity crisis, have them realize that they've been one and the same person all along, but he never really followed up on that. It's just in this one issue that he toyed with that idea.
I mean, that becomes a little bit, way more distinct in the modern day. But yeah, that's interesting that he played with the idea, but then never really followed up on it back in the 70s like that.
Yeah, not even sure why he kind of abandoned that. Maybe Jack C. Harris talked him out of it.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And then a quick side mention here, DC's in-house fanzine, The Amazing World of DC Comics. It published its 17th issue after a hiatus of several months, just kind of a last gasp. It was also the final issue of that fanzine, but it was dedicated to Shazam. And it was published at kind of an interesting time, just as the Shazam monthly series was about to be canceled and reduced to a backup feature in another comic. But they chose that time to do a Shazam sort of spotlight, featuring interviews with Bridwell and Kurt Schaffenberger, and all under a cover by Alan Weiss, who also penciled the interiors for Shazam number 34. So that's I wish I could tell you more about it, but issues of that fanzine are a little hard to come by these days.
Yeah,
I have not read the contents. But then we come to Shazam number 35. This is the final monthly issue of the Shazam series, cover dated May-June 1978. And it has the Marvel family being, Cap and Cap Jr., they're in Chicago. They're summoned at the end of issue 34 for an urgent, they're summoned to deal with an emergency back in New York City, which, as we've said, has been their home all along, apparently. So they go back to New York City, and they find that time is mysteriously running backwards. And there's a certain meta level to that, since the Marvel family had been under criticism for this whole time in the 70s for cleaving too closely to the past, for dealing too much with nostalgia. So time running backwards is kind of an interesting in-plot way to enfigure this criticism of the Marvel family stories. They round up Mary, and together the three of them discover that this time glitch is being caused by King Kull. He has rigged up a time machine that will rewind Earth history back to the point at which humankind rose up against his race of submen and exterminated them. Only this time, when he starts time moving forward again, the submen will have the upper hand, and all of Earth's history will be rewritten in favor of the Beastmen. And he has chosen, of all places, Hell as his hideout.
Why not?
I can think of more reasons why, too, than why not.
Yeah, right.
So the Marvel family, with some advice and instructions from Shazam, go to Hell. They literally travel to the underworld, which Bridwell is really based more on the Greek conceptions of the underworld, Tartarus, than he does on like the Dante version of Hell or the Judeo-Christian visions of Sheol or Gehenna or any of those places. It's really more based on Greek mythology, complete with Charon the ferryman and the three-headed hellhound Cerberus, all of whom the Marvel family have to fight, of course. So they have to go past all these different mythological minions and demons and things, and they find themselves getting a little stronger with each underworld baddie they have to dispatch, until finally they get to punch Satan himself. And this is certainly not the dapper demon Prince Lucifer that showed up a few issues ago. This is a more full-on Satan. He's wearing kind of a long, flowing magenta robe with a cowl and a couple of stubby little horns. His face is kind of gray and stony looking. It kind of looks like how Keith Giffen might choose to draw like the Lord of the Underworld. There's some similarity there. Although Giffen did not draw this issue, it's actually introducing the new art team of fan favorite penciler Don Newton, with Kurt Schaffenberger moving to the status of inker. So it's a great combination, I think, of a compromise between the new and the old. You know, like the 70s sensibilities and the 40s sensibilities between pencil and inker. Good artistic balance.
And certainly, you know, again, the 70s sensibilities of literally going to hell. I mean, you can't talk about how, you know, they're trying to change the tone of the book, you know, that much by pointing out that they went from being kid friendly and 2 issues later they're literally in hell.
Man, at least they're winning, but still.
Yeah, exactly.
Point is taken, and they've made an enemy of Satan. Satan actually would become a recurring antagonist for the remainder of the World's Finest Comic run of the book. Yep. So yeah, you're right. That is absolutely a 70s thing. Trying to keep up with Marvel horror.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's good to see. I have to give a few extra words to Don Newton here, because he made his way into comics through the fanzines. Actually, when C.C. Beck first came on board at DC, he tried to get DC to agree to let him set up something akin to the old shop system that he remembered from his days as a Golden Age artist, which would basically make him editor or chief art director of the title, and he would be able to hire a couple of assistants to work under him to fill in backgrounds and stuff. And that is something that DC flatly refused to allow him to do, and it may be one of the reasons why Julie Schwartz ended up disliking him so much. But one of the first people that Beck wanted to hire was Don Newton. So Don Newton might have become a Captain Marvel artist even sooner than he did if DC had let C.C. Beck have his way. But as it is, he didn't actually get to draw Captain Marvel until 1978. And Captain Marvel and Batman were Newton's 2 favorite childhood comic book characters, and he certainly got to draw plenty of Batman as well. In fact, that's probably the character for which Newton is best remembered nowadays. But yeah, he was a fan favorite. He made his way up through the ranks, and he got a chance to draw his favorite characters before he died a tragically premature death later on in the 80s.
Yeah.
But here we go. We got Don Newton and Kurt Schaffenberger as the new art team. And before we jump into Cap's tenure in World's Finest Comics, one fairly significant Bronze Age milestone pertaining to the World's Mightiest Mortal was something called officially All New Collector's Edition number C58, but unofficially called Superman vs. SHAZAM. Right, and this was a part of DC's Giant Treasury series, which previously had focused mainly on reprints. There were actually several SHAZAM reprints in this giant tabloid format, but again, Jeanette Kahn came in and decided that this format was better used for other projects. And so it was that we got things like the Superman vs. Muhammad Ali giant-size one-shot, which actually saw print just like 2 months before this one did. The Superman vs. SHAZAM one did in spring of 1978. So Superman had some pretty high-profile bouts in this tabloid treasury format. And this was a 72-pager, 72 gigantic pages that finally delivered to fans the full-scale conflict between DC's 2 biggest powerhouses. No anticlimaxes, no hoaxes, dreams, or imaginary stories. These 2 characters finally do have it out with each other. Okay, and the premise, the contrivance that brought this to pass, the bad guy is, he's an ancient Martian, he's a Martian wizard who used to be a benevolent Martian scientist literally 1 million Earth years ago. And he's an evil Martian wizard, and we know that he's evil because his name is Carmang the Evil.
I mean, at least he just, you know, hangs it on a lamppost there, like,
yeah,
you know, no distinction needed. Nope, I'm evil. Told you.
Yep. He's putting it out there. So he's kind of a Martian in the Edgar Rice Burroughs conception. John Jones and his Martian society are mentioned, but Carmang's society well predates them. We're talking 1 million years ago. And he is kind of a classic DC Universe Krona figure or pariah figure in that he's like the classic tortured mad scientist who performs a forbidden experiment and totally destroys his world in the process. It's an experiment to grant himself immortality, but an unforeseen side effect is that it creates this explosion that massacres the rest of his race. However, they do survive in a kind of a phantom zone form. He can see their ghosts screaming and taunting and accusing him, and he has to put up with this for 1 million Earth years, while he works ever so slowly towards finding a way to bring his people back to life. And he finally, conveniently, right around the time DC wanted to publish this one-shot, he comes up with a way to do that. But it involves a macrocosmically enormous release of energy, the kind that is just about equal to the force released by the collision of two parallel Earths. So he decides, for reasons unspecified in the story, that he lives on the Earth and the Mars in the Earth 1 universe. So that Earth, his friendly neighborhood Earth, and Captain Marvel's Earth of Earth S. And he knows he's going to run into some problems with the local superheroes by doing this. So his plan to distract these two alpha protectors of these two Earths is to, recruit a couple of patsies, first of all. And those patsies happen to be Black Adam and a lesser-known Superman opponent of the 70s called the Quarmer. Does that mean anything to you, Ian?
None whatsoever.
Okay. Have you ever read that Superman story from the Bronze Age? It was the beginning of the Denny O'Neil revamp of Superman. That famous Neil Adams cover where Superman's breaking the kryptonite chain and the words "Kryptonite no more" appear at the bottom?
Yes, I have.
Okay. At the very end of that issue, there's kind of an ominous little foreshadowing moment when Superman, after being caught in that nuclear blast that rendered all kryptonite inert and also cut Superman's powers down by a third, there's an outline of Superman's body in the sand that then rises up and takes human form and goes stalking after Superman to suck out his energy.
Yes.
Yes, that sand Superman was called the Quarmer. He came from another dimension called Quarm.
Okay.
Not to be confused with Quard. Totally different Q dimension.
Right. Sure.
Yeah. So for some reason, writer Jerry Conway, who wrote this one shot, I realize now I didn't mention that until now. It was penciled by Rich Buckler with inks by Dick Giordano. So the Quarmer, this sand Superman, was recruited by Carmang the Evil along with Black Adam. Black Adam was disguised as Captain Marvel and sent to pick a fight with Superman, and the Quarmer was disguised as Superman to pick a fight with Captain Marvel on Earth S. Mm-hmm. So, once they've successfully picked those fights, each of these bad guy agents were told by Carmang to fire something called a judgment ray at their opponents, thereby making them irrational and violent. It's basically having the same effect on them that red kryptonite did on Superman in that Justice League story. And so they're both good and angry. And then they fly out the handle and they fly across dimensional barriers even to continue this fight that they think has been started between the two of them. And so that's Carmang's way of getting those two superheroes out of his way while he proceeds to plant the vibro bombs or earthquake machines or whatever they are that will allow Earth 1 and Earth S to collide with each other and release enough energy for Carmang to raise his race from the dead. And he would have gotten away with it if it weren't for those meddling girls. So the Mary Marvel and Supergirl are the ones that get to actually save the day. They play an instrumental role in defeating Carmang and destroying his machinery on Mars. Meanwhile, though, Captain Marvel and Superman, the effects of the Judgment Ray do ultimately wear off, but not in time to prevent them from finishing their clash, because Superman, spoiler here, I guess, Superman's the winner. But if you're a diehard Captain Marvel fan, you can write that off as, it's home field advantage. They happen to be in the Earth 1 universe at that time, right. And old Shazam himself appears to say, oh yeah, my champion's powers aren't as strong outside of his own universe. So that's kind of the out that they provide for people who really wanted to see Cap win the battle, I guess. Yeah. And it ends with Mary Marvel swooning all over Superman, and it's nice that Supergirl and Mary Marvel have their moments in this story, but it kind of fails the Bechdel test.
Well, and not just that, looking at the cover for this issue, you know what? It's nowhere near as striking an image as when Superman was facing a freaking knockoff. Like, it's there's something about the composition of the cover that just doesn't quite work for me. And I don't know if it's the fact that they're, the outstretched punch the way it is or something. Like, just something doesn't quite gel. It's too busy for me.
Yeah, it's very well said. And composition was exactly the word I was going to use as well.
Yeah,
just the way they're the kind of, their bodies are just kind of vertical and parallel to each other, and they're awkwardly extending their fists to each other's faces.
Yep,
they look kind of like they're punch drunk already.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, but yes, you're right. That is definitely a less iconic cover than Superman number 276.
Yes, indeed.
All right, but that was a semi-important milestone and collector's item, and I have to thank Chris in absentia for having picked up my copy of that at an Ides sale out in Pittsburgh a couple of years ago.
Very cool. That was a lot of story.
Yeah, and it's an enormous artwork too. It's a fun book to look at, but the story doesn't really deliver that much.
Yeah.
Well, one more fun little meta detail. I may be way off base here. I certainly can't back it up with any evidence, but Carmang the Evil sounds a little bit like Carmine. So I wonder if it might be the creators taking a jab at DC's former publisher.
Maybe. It's certainly possible.
Yep, just a bit of speculation.
Yep.
All right, now moving on to the second half of Captain Marvel's time at DC in the Bronze Age. And hopefully this will take a little less time to get through, because all these stories I'm going to be talking about are stories that appeared in the back pages of World's Finest Comics, beginning with number 253, cover dated November 1978. And this begins a long, continuous 4-year residency for the Marvel family in the back pages of that series during its dollar comic days. This is another one of Jeanette Kahn's innovations, and it's a major part of the DC Explosion initiative, where they were trying to give comic readers more pages of original content for their comics buck. Charging more for it, but giving the readers more for the money they're spending. But that had already kind of fallen off by November of 1978. The the Explosion initiative really only lasted a few weeks before the upper-ups at Warner pulled the plug on it. But there were still several dollar comics dotting the DC publishing landscape, and World's Finest was one of them. There was the traditional Superman-Batman team-ups, and that would be followed by features like Green Arrow and Black Canary, Hawkman, Red Tornado. There are a couple of Zatanna stories thrown in there, including one drawn by Gene Colan, which I had not known. And, of course, Shazam. And beginning with number 253, that was the new home for the Marvel family. The first story was one of the longest to appear, the Shazam stories to appear in World's Finest. 17 whole pages, not the least bit decompressed, I might add. You can't accuse Bridwell of that. But it involved Captain Nazi and Dr. Sivana and King Kull. Captain Nazi and King Kull had both been captured a couple of issues earlier, but King Kull broke out, and I guess Captain Nazi wrote his shirt tails to freedom. Or he would have if King Kull wore a shirt, which he doesn't. But anyway, Captain Nazi stumbles upon a plot that Dr. Sivana is working on to mentally enslave everybody in New York. But he hijacks it and rigs the will-sapping machine Sivana was using so that it works on everyone except tall, blonde Aryan types like himself.
Yeah, that's that's I don't know if that story would fly today.
Well, he is the bad guy after all.
That's true. No, I know. There's just something about it either way that just just screams 70s to me, and I'll just leave it at that.
and not in the best way.
No, not at all.
Well, I'm confident that Bridwell didn't mean any harm by it, but I don't think he wasn't the most in touch with the times either necessarily. I mean, it's better than Beck, but still,
it's yet again, it's still better than Captain Marvel trying to be cool. So that.
Thump, twang, boing.
Yep.
Yeah, but anyway, King Kull is kind of the X factor here because Captain Nazi mentally enslaves him too, since King Kull is obviously not an Aryan. But he learns from King Kull that King Kull had just minutes ago launched 3 different doomsday devices. So suddenly Captain Nazi is running scared. He needs Captain Marvel in a hurry. So he manages to get a hold of the Marvel family, even though their alter egos had been will-sapped along with the rest of the city. And so we get the Marvels going and disarming these 3 different doomsday devices. We get King Kull breaking free of Captain Nazi's control and having a big slugfest with him. That there's a lot going on in just 17 pages of story. And we even get a nifty cliffhanger where we discover that Station Whiz has somehow fallen into the hands of Billy and Mary's wicked Uncle Eben.
Gasp!
Gadzooks! Yep, the same bad guy that threw poor Billy out into the street and made a homeless newsboy of him back in the Golden Age. Yeah, so this is another Golden Age character that Bridwell is dredging up. And so that follows over directly into World's Finest number 254, where we see that Uncle Eben has gained his current fortune and gained control over Station Whiz as part of a plan for revenge against his nephew and niece because he made a deal with Satan. And Satan has come to collect. Apparently, he made this deal some 20 years ago before the Suspendium incident. And Satan gave him instructions to make certain investments that will pay off over time. And then he cryptically tells Uncle Eben to attend the public awards or recognition ceremony for the Marvel family that led to everybody present at that ceremony being sucked into space and into the Suspendium globe. So Uncle Eben was there. And this is E. Nelson Bridwell's opportunity to revisit that idea from SHAZAM number 1 and show a much expanded group of characters standing there to be sucked into the Suspendium globe, including all the costumed superheroes that have shown up on Earth S since then, Bullet Man and so forth. So he kind of revisits that story and accounts for all these other characters that keep popping up no older than they were in the 50s. So here we have Uncle Eben's soul being claimed by Satan, and Captain Marvel, without the assistance of Billy and Junior and Mary this time, has to go down to hell again and fight a different group of Satan's mythological minions to save Uncle Eben's soul. And of course, he succeeds in doing this. He's got an ace in the hole, though. It's an interesting little twist on the Captain Marvel legacy, cross-pollinated with Bridwell's knowledge of world myth. He gets a little secret weapon from SHAZAM, which ties into Captain Marvel's favorite catchphrase, "Holy moly!" Because moly is a thing. It's not just a nonsense word. Moly is actually the name of an ancient... a mythical herb that was known in the ancient Greek world. And it plays a role in the Odyssey, actually. Odysseus needs to grab some of it with help from the god Hermes to protect himself from the magics of the witch goddess Circe, who had turned the rest of his crew into animals. But this holy moly, this herb that he takes with him, protects him from Circe's magic and enables him to talk Circe into releasing his crew from their spell. So Cap... shows up to hell with some holy moly in his possession. It protects him from the witch goddess Medea, who is a relative of Circe's and is dwelling in hell right now, apparently. And so that helps him secure final victory over Satan. He beats Satan's 6 champions and secures his uncle's soul. And his uncle, in return, promises to turn over a new leaf to release Station Whiz from his control and also to pay back to Billy Batson all the inheritance money that Uncle Eben stole from him all those years ago. So a lot of closure in this little story.
Yeah, and the apparently in our real world, moly may very well be snowdrop. Snowdrop is a type of herb that they believe that may be the basis for moly in the myth of Homer's Odyssey. Look up that more, any of you herbologists or whatever.
I was just about to make like a Professor Sprout reference there. Ian.
Yeah, right.
So thank you for that.
No problem.
Oh, one more cool little fanish detail that Bridwell throws in passing. Uncle Eben remarks to Billy, I seem to recall reading about a different plant named moly. It was famous for its yellow flowers. And then the panel cut to a close-up of Captain Marvel's cape with its yellow floral decorations.
Ah, interesting.
It is. C.C. Beck wouldn't like that because he always swore up and down that those things were not supposed to be flowers. They were just like little decorative ribbons like one might find on a military uniform. But they look like flowers to most people, so Bridwell went with it. And I think that was a pretty cool little tie-in to established myth.
Yeah, dig it.
All right. World's Finest number 255 is a Mary and Bullet Girl team up. I use the expression eldritch ecdysiast in my notes here just to show off my alliteration chops. But she's a woman who learns how to do magic dances. And she sweet talks her way into a spot on Wiz TV, and she promptly uses her magic dancing to put all the men in the city under her power. They're not in love with her. She's actually smart enough to avoid that. She just entrances them in such a way that they all trust her implicitly and give her all their money. But Mary and Bullet Girl aren't fooled, so they bring her down by doing some complex aerial fighting moves that manipulate her into doing her magic dance backwards, which, by the logic of comics, of course, frees all the men watching from her spell.
In other words, Mary and her have a dance-off.
Wow. I'm almost sorry you mentioned that, Ian, because if I had been able to join you for your recent top 5 MCU movies,
yeah,
I would have agreed with 2 of the participants that Guardians of the Galaxy would have been my number 5 choice. But probably the one thing that I dislike most about that movie, the shark jump moment, is Star-Lord challenges Ronan to a dance-off. You had to remind me of that.
Yeah, I know. It's a sore spot, I understand.
Yeah, a little. But anyway, on to happier times. Okay, World's Finest number 256. Here's Bridwell filling in some more little gaps in Billy's backstory. We learn a little bit more about Billy and Mary's long-lost parents. Billy is approached at his office at Wiz TV by a man who claims to be responsible for his parents' deaths, and he wants to turn himself into Captain Marvel. So Billy pumps him for more about this story. Turns out that this guy is a gambler who calls himself Nate Dallas. Probably no relation at all to Nathan Detroit. None at all.
Nope.
And apparently he was approached way back in the day. We're going back to the 20s now. That's about how long ago Billy and Mary's parents would have to have died. They apparently died in a car crash. But this gambler was approached by this otherworldly being calling himself the Gamester, who in Mix's Pitlick fashion says that he plays with other people's lives for fun. And he makes a series of wagers with this professional gambler. And he says that if the gambler loses those wagers, he will be killed by the gamester. But if Nate Dallas wins those wagers, the gamester will instead kill this innocent couple, Merrill and Jocelyn Batson. So there we go. Billy and Mary's parents finally have names, thanks to Bridwell. They were never named before. And so the gambler proceeds to win all of those bets, and sure enough, Merrill and Jocelyn Batson die in a car crash just days later. And so for decades now, we've lived with the guilt of thinking that he's been responsible for these people's deaths. And now the gamester shows up in his life again in the 70s and wants to offer him the same deal. So in desperation, Nate Dallas comes to Billy and asks for his help. And so Cap and Mary Marvel undertake it to themselves to help the gambler out of the gamester's clutches. And in the end, it turns out that the gamester is not at all what he seems, and that this gambler was innocent all along. Billy's and Mary's parents were actually just killed in a car crash. They were not killed by this guy. And so a little bit of closure is acquired for Billy and Mary, and a lot of closure for Nate Dallas.
Yeah, this was the first issue that I read on the DC Universe app of these World's Finest because it was the first one that they happen to have, and all I could think of the entire time I'm reading it is that wow, so it turns out the gamester was Biff Tannen all along.
Yeah, you make like a tree and get out of here, gamester.
Yeah, it was a very I don't know if campy is the right word, but to me it was a very campy issue in the setup, especially because I could pretty much guess the minute that this man from beyond the stars showed up with all this information that it was going to turn out to be somebody from the far-fetched future who just happened to know all the right things from his history books.
Yep, the clues are right there in his costume design too.
Yep.
Yeah, so I agree that campy might not be exactly the right word, but something close to campiness applies here.
Definitely.
Yeah, it was silly and the premise was not very well founded, but it filled a few pages and it gave us Billy and Mary's parents' names.
Yep.
All right, now in number 257, Captain Marvel goes up against a mysterious powerhouse called the Invincible Man. He's tall, he's green-skinned, and he wields all kinds of cosmic energy that he claims to absorb from the very core of creation. The same source that created the Big Bang and that is the source for all other energy in the universe. And as he's sucking on it, the Earth's sun is slowly becoming dimmer. Human beings all over the world are feeling kind of listless and lethargic, including Billy Batson. But as a result of this, he's kind of a physical match for Captain Marvel. So Cap has to use his head. First, the Invincible Man drops a few bits of knowledge in the course of the battle that reveal that he knows a lot about Cap and Billy. Which gives Cap to think that he's probably somebody that he's tangled with before. So Cap has to go visit the maximum security prison. Unlike Arkham Asylum or Superman Island or what have you, it's never given a name. But Cap did, at least for a little while there, have a centralized prison where all of his rogues gallery are interred. And so he kind of goes through the little who's who of all these different bad guys, and most of them seem to be present and accounted for. So the mystery remains as to who the Invincible Man really is. But Cap manages to lure the Invincible Man into a little chamber that he constructs using the impenetrable element Marvelium, which Captain Marvel did invent back in Captain Marvel Adventures number 100, and traps him there where the cosmic energy that powers the Invincible Man can't reach him. And so then Captain Marvel is able to beat the Invincible Man slowly into submission with the stamina of Atlas and forces him to acknowledge that he is in fact Mr. Mind, having projected his mind into this all-powerful homunculus body. So that's the big reveal.
He just keeps on coming back in new bodies.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And once again, as with the gamester, the clue is there in the visual design of the character. He is green, and you can see that little pattern of black circles and red dots running up and down his leg seam. So a fun little Mr. Mind mystery story. All right, number 258 is played kind of for laughs, although it does use Captain Nazi for those laughs again. Captain Nazi has developed a crush on Dr. Sivana's daughter, Beautia Sivana, who is a tall, blonde Aryan type, the kind that the self-proclaimed new Führer of the world would go for. So he kidnaps her and tries to force her to marry him, but she uses her brain and sends Captain Nazi off on a wild goose stepper chase to get a dress and flowers and stuff, sending him in places where she knows Captain Marvel Jr. or Freddie Freeman is going to be hanging out. And, if you want to take Captain Nazi down, the best thing you can do is put him into the path of Captain Marvel Jr. So that is what Beautia does. She uses her brains, and it's another one of the funnier stories, I think, that Bridwell turned in during the Bronze Age. But, again, it does involve Captain Nazi.
Another name that's just right on the money. Beautia is an attractive woman. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Who knew?
And her brother is Magnificus, and he's rather strong and handsome. Yeah, that's another Golden Age deep cut. Magnificus appeared in one Golden Age story. I think it was Whiz Comics number 11. That's how far back we're going.
Oh, wow.
And then it was Bridwell that brought him back out of obscurity, too.
He's good at that.
Oh, yes. It's a specialty of his. Let's see. Number 259 is another Mr. Tawny story, The Secret of Mr. Tawny. And this kind of revisits Mr. Talkie Tawny's origins. He goes to a certain Dr. Ambrose for a physical, and he retells his origin story, how an eccentric hermit scientist fed Mr. Tawny an herbal potion that the scientist had whipped up that gave Mr. Tawny the ability to think and speak like a human being. And Dr. Ambrose is fascinated by this, and he points out that what that potion actually did to Mr. Tawny was accelerate his evolution, so that slowly over the years he has been becoming more and more humanoid. Now his paws look more and more like human hands and feet. His spine is straightened to the point that Mr. Tawny can barely walk on all fours anymore. So Dr. Ambrose takes a blood sample and logically, analyzes it and distills what's left of that jungle potion in that blood sample, and somewhat less logically chooses to drink it. And he's immediately super evolved into this otherworldly being called the Superior. He's basically evolved into a fifth-dimensional imp, complete with purple and green jester costume. Apparently he doesn't have superior fashion sense.
Nope.
Nor superior common sense, because it's very easy for Mr. Tawny and Captain Marvel to trick him into drinking an antidote to turn him back into mild-mannered Dr. Ambrose again. So, narrow scrape for the home team there on Earth S. All right, Cap number 260 of World's Finest is a story that kind of resonates with contemporary issues. Captain Marvel has to deal with prejudice against mythological creatures. Because apparently a few of them have immigrated to Cap's neighborhood in New York recently from whatever enchanted forests or Arcadian glens they previously called home. There's a couple of centaurs, there's a satyr, there's a mermaid, there's even a lamia, the vampiric half-snake, half-woman of Greek myth. And they're all just trying to, work for a living. They just want to make a life for themselves and their families in America, and everybody wants to throw them out. Build the wall. So it just shows you how timeless these themes can be. And so Captain Marvel has to work to convince the other people in the neighborhood that these mythological creatures deserve a place in their home. And finally, when these creatures are able to use their powers to save the neighborhood from a natural disaster, that's enough to turn the tide.
We don't take kindly to you folk around here.
Yeah, you folks, what's as animals and people all at once. All right, so moving right along from that, in World's Finest 261, we get Mary Marvel versus Georgia Savannah, Dr. Savannah's daughter, for the first time in the Bronze Age. Georgia Savannah is running a scam. It's called the old living sculpture scam, grift, where she pretends to be a sculptor and she uses an immobilization ray to turn her henchmen into statues, then sells them to rich people, and then the henchmen revert to human form and rob the place. That's the scheme. It doesn't take Mary long to undo it. World's Finest number 262. Now, this one is somewhat important, especially to fans of Jerry Ordway's Power of Shazam series from the 90s, because Ordway definitely read this story and references it at some length. Captain Marvel is visited by the Captain Marvel of 7000 BC, who is a young man with a brown beard and kind of draped with a sort of a tunic-type garment, whatever they were wearing back then, which is somewhat reminiscent of Cap's own costume with the lightning bolt and everything. And he says he's come to the far future to get Cap's help to round up the 7 deadly enemies of man and another classic Golden Age foe, the 3 faces of evil back in the distant past. So they go back there, they confer with the 6 primordial gods that give this guy his powers. He just calls himself the champion, this Captain Marvel of 7000 BC. And these gods' names are Voldar, Lumion, Arel, Ribelve, Elbiam, and Marzash. And yes, that was from memory.
Well done.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And so they, with advice from these gods, they're the ones who give the primordial Captain Marvel his powers. They round up all these bad guys, and Captain Marvel discovers that he gets to be the one who first helps to imprison the 3 faces of evil in the Rock of Eternity, which is where these evil people were when they first escaped in an early issue of the Marvel family back in the 40s. So lots of ties to Golden Age continuity here. And then the big reveal, finally, when the time comes for the 2 Captains Marvel to part company, the 7000 BC one says his magic word, Vlarem, and is transformed back into a young boy, just like Billy. And Billy suddenly puts 2 and 2 together and bids farewell to his new friend and flies to see old Shazam at his temple and says, "Hey, old Shazam, you were that Captain Marvel, weren't you? You once wielded God powers the way you give out God powers to other people these days. You were the champion back in the old days." And Shazam admits to it, and he further admits that the reason why he first named his champion of the 20th century Captain Marvel in the first place was because Marvel is an anagram of his old magic word Vlarem. So it's a tip of the hat to, or the headband or whatever they were wearing in 7000 BC, to the old gods that first empowered him and that everyone but Shazam himself has long since forgotten. His little way of keeping his old patrons alive.
That's actually a really cool story, and reminds me of how DC wrote it that Hippolyta was at one point filling in for Wonder Woman in the Golden Age.
Yes.
Yeah. So
sort of an Ouroboros retcon.
Exactly. Yeah, and I'd love to see the wizard Shazam take on Vandal Savage back in 7000 BC. That would make me a happy man.
Man, Ian, that is a story that cries out to be written.
Yes.
I wholeheartedly agree. And shit, with all the things that Scott Snyder's been doing with DC prehistory these days, it's we ought to.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
All right. So, yeah, that's dead. Clearly, Jerry Ordway thought it was a cool story, too, because, as we'll see when we get to Spotlight on Shazam in the 90s, we do get that as a part of Shazam's origin. All right. Then in number 263 of World's Finest, we get a junior solo story bringing back his old enemy, and that is old in scare quotes, Graybeard. And this is another revival from the Golden Age. He was literally an old man who sometime in the 19th century was arrested for a crime he committed as a teenager, sentenced to 99 years in prison, but somehow lived it out, and as a super centenarian gets out of prison and becomes the king of crime. So it's youth versus age is kind of the theme of his clashes with Captain Marvel Jr. And here he's showing up trying to press Freddie Freeman for the secret of Suspendium so that Graybeard can make himself functionally immortal. And Freddie says, nuh-uh, and just basically beats him up and sends him back to prison.
They really should have named this story Get Off My Lawn.
Oh, yeah, here's another point where I wish Shane were here to do his classic reading of that line, because nobody does it better than he. All right. Now, in the next few issues of World's Finest Comics, we get another, it's kind of a very, very, very much scaled-down version of the Monster Society of Evil serial. It's instead of like a 20-part serial, it's a 4-part serial running in World's Finest 264 through 267. It's called The Monster Society Strikes Back. And here we have Mr. Mind once again gathering a bunch of classic baddies to send them against the Marvel family, pretty much hopelessly. Dr. Sivana is there, of course, as is Ibak the Cursed, King Kull the Beast Man, Mr. Atom, Black Adam, those are two people who didn't get a chance to be a part of the Monster Society first time around, and making his Bronze Age debut, Agar the Immortal, who was the big bad of the Cult of the Curse serial, which was conceived as kind of a sequel or a follow-up to the Monster Society one, and tanked pretty badly with the readership, lasting only 6 chapters. And it ended with Agar being turned into a wild boar and thrown off a cliff. But apparently he survived as an immortal wild boar, and only just recently was able to free himself from the magic spell that left him in that state, just in time to join Mr. Mind's revived Monster Society. And they're dispatched all over Earth and surrounding outer space to do all kinds of bad things. They're sent out in pairs. So we get King Kull and Mr. Atom, two characters that both want to exterminate humanity, teaming up to try and accomplish that. So it's got a multi-part story, which wasn't happening that much for Cap at this time. And once they finally corner the entire Monster Society on the Rock of Eternity, it takes a big showdown to beat them all, including the entire Marvel family, plus the lieutenants being called back into action again.
And yeah, to have 2 multi-part stories back to back is a nice thing to see there as well.
Are you providing me a segue, Ian?
Why, yes, I am.
Oh, thank you, sir. So I'm needing to lean on things like that more and more. I'm starting to. My eyes are starting to cross here. But
no worries.
We're in the second half of our review here of the Bronze Age. Good Lord. Jumping back into it then. In World's Finest, number 268 and 269, as Ian foreshadowed, it's a 2-parter focusing on Captain Marvel Jr. It's retelling his origin, in which Captain Nazi, as we said, was involved, and reintroducing another one of his personal rogues, Sabak, who is one of several Marvel family opponents who gets his powers from a coalition of demons. So his name and his magic power activation word is also an acronym for the names of 6 different demons, I don't know if I should bother mentioning them now. I don't think I will. But one of them is Satan. So we see Satan again. He's the S in Sabak.
I kind of guessed.
Right. Yeah, the others are a little more unusual.
Yeah.
And so he's the bad guy here. He's using some kind of dream projector to send Freddy images of the ocean, which we're told is responsible for the deaths of just about all of Freddy's family, really. His father was a fisherman, and his mother was a fisherman's widow. So his parents' names are David and Rebecca. That was never revealed before. So his father drowned out on his fishing boat, and his mother drowned waiting for him out on the docks. And also his long-lost brother Christopher died in a boating accident, and his both of his grandparents died at sea. So Sabak is sending Freddy images of the ocean in his dreams to try and manipulate Freddy into drowning himself in the ocean, thereby ending Captain Marvel Jr.'s threat to Sabak for all time. But Freddy was too wise for all of that and tracks down Sabak and beats him, as always. And this is the first time that Freddy's brother, Christopher, or Kit, has been mentioned in comics. It won't be the last, as we will see. And now we're going to step aside briefly from World's Finest for a little extra Captain Marvel story that popped up in one of my favorite series of all time, DC Comics Presents, a two-parter, another one of those, in issues number 33 and 34, which were May and June issues for 1981. Now, this is the first time that Roy Thomas, the man who had become kind of the architect of Captain Marvel's destiny for a lot of years, well, maybe not a lot of years, but for most of the 80s, this is his first crack at writing Captain Marvel. He wrote the script, co-plotted with Jerry Conway, and the art was provided by the same art team that did that giant tabloid Superman vs. Shazam one-shot, Rich Buckler and Dick Giordano. It's the old power switcheroo gimmick, where Superman and Captain Marvel, it is getting late.
Yes, it is.
Inexplicably switch costumes and powers. They suddenly discover that they've got each other's power sets and costumes, and it's left to them to figure out the how and the why of it. And it soon turns out that Mr. Mxyzptlk, who has teamed up with Mr. Mind and King Kull over on Earth S, is to blame for this. His Mxyzptlk's magic is actually stronger on Earth S than it is on Earth 1. Funny little detail there. I guess its whimsical sensibilities just kind of feed into Mr. Mxyzptlk's nature.
Yeah.
But anyway, he's teamed up to make mischief with Mr. Mind and King Kull, and he ends up exiling Superman and Cap to another dimension. You might call it Earth S- or something, but it happens to be home to Hoppy the Marvel Bunny. So we get to see that character make his first appearance in a good long time. So the Cap and Superman have to fight against a giant mechanical animal thing that is waiting for them there. It's been set for them by Mr. Mind to keep them busy. While King Kull, meanwhile, is busy trying to take over the United Nations back on Earth S and kind of single-handedly warding off Junior and Mary, because he's been given like triple Shazam powers by Mr. Mxyzptlk's magic. Mxyzptlk is kind of having second thoughts about this whole thing, though, because Mr. Mind and King Kull are both much more bloodthirsty than he is. He's just in it for the mischief. They want to commit genocide, basically, and besides which, they're mean to Mr. Mxyzptlk and don't appreciate what his power is gaining them. So finally, he just says, enough with this. I know it's going to mean I'm banished back to the fifth dimension for 90 days, but hell with it. Kill Tipsy Zim. And at just that moment, he says that just as Hoppy the Marvel Bunny, who has found his way to Earth S along with Cap and Superman, he's just about to land one on the jaw of the otherwise invincible King Kull. It would have had no effect except Mxyzptlk withdrew his magic at that moment, so King Kull, after taunting Hoppy the Marvel Bunny, this flying pink rabbit, into trying to defeat him and allowing Hoppy to land the first punch, King Kull is one-punched out by Hoppy the Marvel Bunny. It is a great way to end that story.
Job well done. I love that Mxyzptlk was just like, I'm out. Drops the mic, walks away like I'm done with you guys. And my favorite part of the cover is the fact that you can only really tell that it's Superman in the Shazam outfit and not Captain Marvel because he's got the spit curl.
Right. Yeah, it's on a meta level. This is Roy Thomas's little way at pointing up the differences between Supes and Captain Marvel, despite all the effort that was spent by DC's legal department in the 40s to show how they were just the same.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, that is a really fun story. If you go back and listen to the Crisis Tapes episode 5, Peter Rios and I talk about, it's a top 5 episode where we talk about our favorite parallel Earth stories. This made our lists.
Very good.
So go there for more details. Okay, so hopping right back into World's Finest Comics. Issue number 270 is a story where Captain Marvel meets the long-lost son of his landlords Ma and Pa Potter, His name was Dan, and he's been missing for years. It turns out it's because he was abducted by aliens who were keeping him on their planet for study and learning what he knows about human culture. And as a parting gift to him, they use their super science to transform him physically into their physical type. They transform his body into one of theirs. And their bodies, Ian, look kind of like the alien who is in the opening sequence to Men in Black.
Oh,
the one who's trying to sneak across the Mexican border.
Yep.
So poor Dan Potter comes back to Earth looking like that. And Cap has to take him back to this alien planet and coerce these aliens into making him look human again. And I guess the moral here is kind of about the suffering we cause when we impose our own ethnocentric standards of beauty on others.
Yep. Or we have come to your planet and we're going to give you neuralizers and cool suits.
Okay, then we're going to hop over to World's Finest number 272. That's a Mary solo story where she goes up against a new villainess named Chain Lightning, who's a young woman who labored over intensive studies of ancient alchemy for many years to unlock the secret of magic lightning. And, of course, she immediately uses it to commit petty thefts. She attempts to rob a society gala that Mary's adoptive mother, society matron Mrs. Bromfield, is holding. So Mary and Chain Lightning have it out with each other, and Chain Lightning has the power to steal Mary's SHAZAM powers. So many electrical villains seem to be able to do that on Earth S. But Mary outwits her and defeats her. And Chain Lightning is another character from this World's Finest run that Jerry Ordway will later make use of.
Very good. And what a concept that a villain with lightning in her name winds up being a foil for a Marvel.
Kind of putting it right out there.
Yep.
Let's see. World's Finest number 273, another Golden Age callback from E. Nelson Bridwell, to a story called Sivana's Good Inventions, which ran in Marvel Family number 50, where it was revealed that Sivana actually has a whole hidden cave where he throws all of his inventions that are accidentally beneficial to mankind. And that story, Captain Marvel seizes that cache of good inventions and releases them to the world. And in this story, it's revealed that over the past 20 or so years, those inventions have really made life much better on Earth S, and Dr. Sivana, to his horror, is going to be honored with a Nobel Prize. and he goes to hella drastic lengths to avoid having to accept this friggin' Nobel Prize. He uses another one of his inventions to foment wars all over the planet Earth just to distract everybody from the Nobel ceremonies. But Captain Marvel finds this machine and rewires it to create world peace for a few brief precious days, and it even affects Sivana's mind, putting him into a peaceful state so that he is only too glad to go and accept his Nobel Prize. And in the end of it all, he's nominated for a second Nobel Prize for peace.
and then, of course, he donates all of his money to charity, and he starts up a new foundation, and he buys a bunch of dogs, and yeah, he's a happy person until it wears off.
Yep, really dragging his bad name through the mud there.
Yep.
And this is something that I know Chris would appreciate. This issue also begins a subplot for a minor supporting character, Miss Jameson, Billy's receptionist, who knows about Billy's double identity. She's getting mysterious phone calls from a person from her past. And I'm kind of comparing it to the situation that Peter Parker's occasional love interest, J. Jonah Jameson's receptionist, Betty Brant, had to put up with when her black sheep brother starts sniffing around. So then we have a couple of issues in which Cap goes up against gangsters, something he hasn't done much since he got back from the Suspendium Globe. And he gets tangled up in a little feud between a couple of mobsters, and one of them is employing an assassin with the super ability to cancel sound called the Silencer. And so he defeats the Silencer and brings an end to this little feud. He gets an assistant from Cap Jr. and Magnificus Sivana, the good son of Dr. Sivana, who actually acts as a body double for Captain Marvel at one point during that caper. Then we get a really silly story in issue number 276. It's called Magicians and Mercenaries. I'm just going to read what I have here in my notes. Other dimensional space wizards are invading. So Miss Jameson's brother, this is the reveal of this little subplot I mentioned a couple minutes ago, a soldier of fortune, a mercenary, joins the Marvels in fighting back, aided by a crew of his mercenary buddies, many of whom are dead. To be continued.
Bum, bum, bum.
So there's Bridwell, taking a few cues from the Marvel formula of constantly ongoing subplots and foreshadowing. So we learn what Miss Jameson's terrible secret was. Her brother is a soldier of fortune, and she's ashamed of him, even though he's not really a bad guy once you get to know him.
Chris Claremont, eat your heart out.
Cha-cha-cha. All right, so over the next couple of issues, the Marvel family begin to receive more and more mysterious and unexplained assists from impossible beings who are either long dead or are products of fiction or myth and have never existed in the first place. So those dead mercenaries that suddenly show up in issue number 276 are just the first. In number 278, Satan empowers yet another agent after Ibak and Sabak and who knows who else have failed him already. He makes a deal with a mousy young woman named Dora Keene, who's tired of being overlooked by everyone around her and wants the power to dominate people. Satan gives her something called a cloak of darkness. If this were happening in the Marvel Universe, it would be tied into the Dark Force dimension, I'm pretty sure.
Yep.
From one of the darkest pits of hell that transforms her from a mousy, bespectacled brunette into the exotic, white-skinned Darkling. There's a little bit of sex appeal going on there, who has the ability to manipulate very potent Stygian darkness, just impenetrable shadow fields that not even magic lightning can pierce. And so the Darkling goes out and gets the drop on the Marvel family when they're in their human identities and would have suffocated them in her demonic darkness, except Mary is rescued, and only Mary, by Thialfi, the Norse god of speed. Kind of a surprise cameo there. And Thialfi whisks her straight away to the Rock of Eternity to have a confab with Shazam. Shazam reveals that he did not send Thialfi. He knows who did, but he's sworn to secrecy for the time being. He sends Mary as Mary Marvel up to the pinnacle of the Rock of Eternity to fetch some living light from up there. And as she's up there, she can almost make out the outline of a person in there. Hence my note here in my outline, definite Christian symbolism going on there. Mm-hmm. Mary has to take the living light down to dispel the darkness of hell. It's light that the darkness cannot stand against. And that's how she defeats the Darkling and banishes her to hell, I guess, and rescues her friends.
Oh, Satan, what'll you come up with next?
You scamp. All right, so all this stuff with dead people and mythological figures and literary heroes showing up out of nowhere, that all comes to a head in a two-part story in issues number 280 and 281. This, after months of foreshadowing, Bridwell finally fulfills what I suspect has been a fanish dream of his for years and brings Kid Eternity fully into the Marvel family fold. We had that cameo back in Shazam number 26. So now he's being revealed as, via retcon, as Freddie Freeman's long-lost brother, Kit Freeman. So we retell both Junior's origin again and also Kid Eternity's origin, and revealing how the two of them were brothers and each went to live with a different grandfather, and they were both killed in similar ways by Nazis at sea. And the result of that heavenly clerical error that gave Kid Eternity's powers in the first place was that he was confused with his brother. It was actually Freddy who was supposed to die and go to heaven, but instead Kit died and went to heaven, whereas Freddy was rescued by Captain Marvel. So Shazam was actually complicit in all of this. It was all kind of it's strongly implied in the story that Shazam and Mr. Keeper were in cahoots here to provide the Earth with not one, but two new mystically powered heroes to help fight the good fight during World War II. Plus, for added connectivity, Otto Binder wrote many stories featuring both Captain Marvel Jr. and Kid Eternity, becoming, I think, the definitive writer of Kid Eternity. So they kind of had common DNA from the start. So you could say Bridwell was, in a sense, justified in making Cap Jr. and Kid Eternity brothers. Yeah,
it's a shame that didn't really stick past past this version of the characters, really. That's been taken out of their history over time.
Yeah, you can sort of blame Grant Morrison for that, but not too much, because at that point, Captain Marvel Jr. had been written out of continuity.
Right.
So I guess some later writer could have reestablished the bond between them, but
Yeah.
it's kind of obscure anyway.
Right.
I mean, only people who are fans of Bronze Age continuity and or have read Who's Who really know about this link between those two characters, which Bridwell totally forged himself via retcon.
Yep.
Okay, so the extended Marvel family then, as their first family outing, gets to go and deal with Mr. Mind, who has used some kind of an enlarging machine to expand himself to the size of Godzilla. So they have to deal with that, a kaiju-sized Mr. Mind. And Kid Eternity helps out by summoning a mythological figure, Sigurd Dragonbane, I think was the guy's name. He's the one who killed the dragon Fafnir in Old Norse myth. But he's just a distraction, actually. He goes and frees the Marvel kids from the cocoons that Mr. Mind had spun them into so that they can then empower themselves. Meanwhile, Kid Eternity has also summoned Puck from A Midsummer Night's Dream to disable Mr. Mind's enlarging gizmo, and it's all a pretty easy fight after that. So, fun little family deal there with Kid Eternity. And the family fun continues in issue number 282 of World's Finest Comics, dated August 1982. This was the last extra-sized dollar comic issue of World's Finest Comics, and therefore the last Shazam backup to appear therein. And the writing was kind of on the wall there. The dollar comic series had been shrinking steadily for a couple of years then. They were originally 80 pages. I think they were more like 68 or 64-page comics for $1 by the time Shazam began as a feature. World's Finest, and it had dwindled down to 48 pages by now, and so here we are. World's Finest 282 was the last supersized dollar comic issue before it just shrank back down to a 32-page comic starring just Superman and Batman. And this final World's Finest story it's really more a Kid Eternity story than it is a Marvel family story. It brings back a couple of Kid Eternity's old sparring partners, not even really villains or opponents, just Runyon-esque con women, and bumbling ones at that. Their names were Her Highness and Silk. Her Highness is this bent-over old lady, and Silk was her younger, more attractive accomplice. And they would always try to run scams, and Kid Eternity and Mr. Keeper would always foil them, and they'd just kind of say, oh, gosh, darn it, you got us again. And then the pattern would repeat. Yeah, they were actually popular enough with readers that they got their own ongoing solo feature in Hit Comics, which lasted for years. Kind of unusual for characters of that kind to have their own solo feature in those days, but Her Highness and Silk had the goods, apparently.
Well, I guess they enjoy Queens, so Her Highness would be right up your alley. All right, so here they team up with a similar character from Captain Marvel's background, Aunt Minerva, and the three of them they devise a scam which will keep the Marvel family occupied, putting on a charity show, which is perfectly legitimate. All proceeds from that really will go to a charity. You know, the three con women have arranged it to be that way. But meanwhile, Her Highness, Silk, and Aunt Minerva and their gangs will be out pillaging the homes of the well-to-do attendees of this charity performance. But Kid Eternity and Mr. Keeper get wind of it and foil the scheme as usual. And the story is also kind of special in that it features artwork by Gil Kane. One of the best.
Indeed. Yeah, I forgot to mention it a while ago, but Kurt Schaffenberger only stayed on as Don Newton's inker for to a certain point in this run. The number of 259, The Secret of Mr. Tawney, was his last one. And then it was kind of a succession of different inkers, like Dan Adkins, Frank Caramonte, Dave Hunt, etc. But Don Newton, with the exception of this final issue by Gil Kane, he penciled the entire World's Finest run. And one final hurrah, then, for the Marvel family and E. Nelson Bridwell and Don Newton. Adventure Comics, which is another series that had been a dollar comic for a while. In mid-1982, it too ceased to be a dollar comic. But instead of reverting to like a 32-page format, I think it already had, actually. That's where like the Plastic Man feature and the Ditko Starman appeared, the Prince Gavin Starman. But with issues number 491 and 492, it became one of those little digests that DC was experimenting with in the early 80s. You ever seen those, Ian?
Yeah, I've seen them occasionally at comic shops, but not very often.
Yeah, they're fairly rare and pretty collectible. Pants will back me up on that. But if you can find them, some of them actually they're mostly reprints, but some of them had new material. And in Adventure Comics Digest number 491 and 492, the first two issues of this digest format, we get one more little two-part story with the Marvel family and Kid Eternity. This is probably like a last bit of inventory story that Bridwell had finished ahead of time before World's Finest kicked the feature out. So it features the Marvel family and Kid Eternity versus the Confederation of Hell, which is all of the bad guys faced by the Marvel family and Kid Eternity in the past who have demonic powers. So you got your Ibak, you got your Sabak, you got the Darkling, and you've got Kid Eternity's old archenemy, Master Man, who can do exactly what Kid Eternity can do, summon historical figures or mythological figures who are evil by saying the magic word Stygia. So, Master Man and the Confederation of Hell, plus a bunch of guest appearances by demons from world mythology, they make up the final Captain Marvel story of the Bronze Age, brought to us by the team of Bridwell and Newton. It's their swan song on that character, and kind of an additional tragic dimension there in that both of those creators, Bridwell and Newton, would be dead within 5 years.
Oh, wow.
Yep, Newton had a heart attack in 1984, and Bridwell finally died of lung cancer in early 1987.
Damn. I mean, I'm glad that they got to at least finish out their arc in a way, in one way or another. But it's a shame that they died that soon after. Yeah.
And they did get to do a little extra work after that. I mean, Bridwell brought us the Oz Wonderland War and Captain Carrot and his amazing zoo crew, among other things. And Don Newton got to draw an issue of Roy Thomas's All-Star Squadron, which was on his bucket list as it happened.
Very good.
All right, so now a few more scattershot guest appearances by Captain Marvel and crew are all that are left to address. All right, first of all, DC Comics presents number 49. Okay, so Captain Marvel making another appearance as a team-up with Superman in this series. Once again, written by Roy Thomas, or at least the plot was. The script was by Paul Kupperberg, art by Rich Buckler and John Calnan. This story involves Black Adam finding his way to Earth-1, bent on conquest. And he battles Superman to a standstill, using hostages as leverage for the most part, until Captain Marvel is able to find his way over from Earth-S to join the fray. But in the end, Black Adam is defeated by one of his hostages, who just happens to be Billy Batson of Earth-1.
Wow.
That's right. There was one of those on Earth-1. And Roy Thomas kind of teases us with a little mock origin story telling us how the Billy Batson of Earth-1 gained his Shazam powers. But it turns out to be just a dream that Billy has. And he wakes up and he's just a normal kid living with his Uncle Dudley Batson, who is a retired vaudevillian and former stage magician. And so on Earth-1, apparently Uncle Marvel really is Billy Batson's uncle. That was Roy Thomas's idea. And ultimately... Billy Batson happens to be in like a central park of Metropolis when Black Adam attacks, and he's grabbed by Black Adam and held as a hostage. And young Billy, recognizing Black Adam from the Captain Marvel comics he reads, tries saying Shazam to turn himself into Captain Marvel, but it just doesn't work for him. But in the end, it's Earth-1 Billy who pulls an Uncle Marvel and tricks Black Adam into saying Shazam, and then he can be defeated by Cap of Earth-S and Superman. So it's a clever little insertion here by Roy Thomas. This is Earth-1 Billy is based on something that Roy had, along with Don Newton, had wanted to do a year or two earlier. He had come up with a pitch for a Captain Thunder strip. Not the same Captain Thunder that we got in Superman number 276, but an Earth-1 Captain Thunder, whose alter ego would have been the Billy Batson of Earth-1, who was also, according to the... If you Google, like, Don Newton Captain Thunder, you'll probably get the little piece of sample art he produced for this. Billy Batson and Captain Thunder were originally going to be African-American.
Oh, wow.
Roy Thomas really thought that instead of doing what had been done with Captain Marvel as a concept to date... somewhere in my scattershot notes, I've got a quotation from Roy Thomas, which is something to the effect of, here we go. Carmine Infantino's mistake was in thinking that there is a market for nostalgia alone. There isn't. And coming from Roy Thomas, that means something. Anyway, he wanted to launch a more contemporary, diverse Earth 1 version of Captain Marvel. And that would have been this Captain Thunder that I'm talking about. And so he kind of mined that idea to bring us the Earth 1 Billy Batson scene in this story. And he would mine it further because ultimately, as we'll find out in our next Spotlight episode, the Earth 1 Billy Batson is kind of a pre-crisis dry run for the post-crisis Shazam A New Beginning reboot miniseries that Roy Thomas would put out through DC a few years later after Crisis had happened.
Yeah, and I did find the artwork for that, and yeah, I mean that certainly would have been one hell of a change for the character, to say the least. Yeah.
It would have been fine because, the classic Earth S version would still be there.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Meanwhile, we would have a new African-American hero from Earth 1 based on a long-standing tradition.
Yeah. I just wonder if it would have continued past Crisis on Infinite Earths. That would have been the interesting part.
Yeah, if they had gone ahead and made an Earth 1 Captain Thunder.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I think he would have stood a better chance of surviving the Crisis than the Earth S Marvels would have.
I would agree with you, yeah.
All right, so let's jump from there to yet another DC Comics Presents appearance for Captain Marvel. I haven't done an official count, but at 4 different issues, I think he might be close to holding a record for a number of guest appearances in DCCP.
Wow.
Yeah, this is the DC Comics Presents Annual number 3, the 1984 annual. And we get Gil Kane doing the artwork again. This story may be a case of too many cooks. There are plot credits given to Roy Thomas, Julie Schwartz, and Gil Kane. Script by Joey Cavalieri and art by Gil Kane. This story has Dr. Sivana causing trouble across 3 different parallel Earths. He comes to Earth 1 and tries to defeat Superman with a giant robot. That does not work at all. So he goes to his plan B, which is to go to the Rock of Eternity and use some gadgets of his to finagle Shazam powers for himself. So he becomes a Marvel-powered Dr. Sivana, who is wearing a costume kind of similar in color scheme to Fat Man the Human Flying Saucers, actually. It's green with yellow accents and a yellow lightning bolt. He dubs himself Captain Sivana and goes on to battle with Captain Marvel, using some kind of mind whammy on Captain Marvel to convince him that Sivana has gained power at Captain Marvel's expense. Like Captain Marvel is now left with the weaknesses of the Shazam elders instead of the strengths. And there's even a little diagram of what the weaknesses of the elders are, like the love of luxury of Solomon, the poor judgment of Hercules, and so on. All of this is not really the case. He's just using psychology on Captain Marvel. He really has all of his regular powers. But Sivana manages to convince Captain Marvel he's been weakened and then buries Captain Marvel alive in the Rock of Eternity and then flies off to have revenge on Superman. And he ends up having revenge not only on the Superman of Earth 2, but for some reason he blunders his way to Earth. Not just the Superman of Earth 1, but he blunders his way to Earth 2 and beats up that Superman first as like a little test of his abilities. So we get a little appearance by guest victim Earth 2 Superman, just for added violence. And in the end, Captain Marvel, after getting a pep talk from the elders who appear to him in spirit form, he breaks free of the Rock of Eternity and helps Superman of Earth 1 defeat Captain Sivana, who he progressively, a running gag in this story, he keeps promoting himself from Captain, to, I don't remember my ranks, Captain Sivana to Major Sivana to Colonel Sivana and finally General Sivana. And then his name is just Mud. Yeah. Because he's pretty definitively beaten by Superman, and it's not a very good script. Let's just put it where it's not a good story. It's the characterizations for everybody except Sivana himself are pretty weak, and Captain Marvel is just almost unrecognizable in the way he behaves. So yeah, it's a 48-pager. It's one of the longest Shazam stories of the Bronze Age. The Superman versus Shazam tabloid probably takes the cake there, but I would argue it's also one of the weakest. So I don't exactly give it my seal of approval.
But at least there's some Gil Kane.
Yeah. He is, as you say, one of the all-time greats.
Yes, he is.
All right, a few more things to touch on here, and then I think we're going to call it a night. So we've got a couple of appearances that Captain Marvel made amidst the chaos of Crisis on Infinite Earths. But before that, Roy Thomas gets to use the good captain in his beloved World War II setting by crossing Cap and the Marvel family of 1942 over with the World War II era heroes of All-Star Squadron, which was Roy Thomas's baby from start to finish. Yeah, Roy used the Marvels in issues number 36 and 37 of All-Star Squadron, cover dated August and September of 1984. And in that story, the World War II era Captain Marvel gets shanghaied magically to Earth 2 by Nazi scientists in 1942, and there magic is further used to split Captain Marvel from Billy Batson. And it's a part of the premise of All-Star Squadron, one of the prevailing plot devices, that Hitler and the Dragon King, who was an agent of the Japanese government, had in their possession the magical Spear of Destiny and the Holy Grail, which between them set up a magic energy field over all the Axis-held territories in World War II that prevented any magically empowered or magically vulnerable super beings from invading Axis territory. If they tried it, the magic spell would automatically turn those magical champions into loyal servants of the Third Reich. So that's how it was that Captain Marvel became known on Earth 2 as the Super Nazi, because he automatically fell under Hitler's control, and Hitler uses him against RAF forces. And the All-Star Squadron catches wind of this through newsreels. Superman is particularly tweaked about this. For some reason, there's something in the meta fabric of the two characters. Superman really objects to Captain Marvel being on his Earth in the 40s.
Yep.
Yeah, you might even say there's some kind of bad blood between them somehow.
Yeah. So, somehow he just wants to slap him with a lawsuit. It's crazy.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
So, Superman kind of takes the point when the time finally comes to battle Captain Marvel. The All-Star Squadron is aided in this at first by Junior and Mary, who find their way to Earth 2 themselves, but unfortunately they're captured by the Nazis, and they're split from their human alter egos, and they are then made superpowered servants of the Third Reich. So, a crew of non-magic vulnerable All-Stars. The Superman is certainly excluded from this because, as we all know, Superman is vulnerable to magic, although we don't really know why. That's actually something that Roy Thomas was setting up as a subplot that he didn't get to follow through with in the All-Star Squadron series, was to explain why the Earth 2 Superman would be vulnerable to magic. But anyway, the fact is that he is, and so he couldn't go on the rescue mission into the heart of Berlin to rescue the human alter ego of the Marvels. Plastic Man heads up that mission along with a bunch of other non-magical all-stars. And they finally managed to get the kids out of Axis-held territory. Once they get into British waters, they're outside the influence of the Spear of Destiny, and the Marvels... Apparently the important thing is where the human halves of the Marvels are. If the human halves of the Marvels are in Axis-held territory, then the Marvels are Axis slaves no matter where they go in the world. But if the kids are taken outside of the sphere of influence of the Spear of Destiny, out of Axis territory, then the Marvels are free to go wherever they want without fear of being made Nazi slaves again. But anyway, long story short, the good guys win, and Cap and Superman do have it out briefly. The results are inconclusive, and Superman makes some little meta remark to the effect of, gee, I don't think we could have picked a winner even if we fought for over a decade.
Oh, boy. Well, I read the issue 36 of this, and I love the use of film reel, and the art is fantastic, and I cannot wait to read more of All-Star Squadron now. This is going to be a fun read.
Yeah, I'm glad that you caught the All-Star Squadron bug, Ian.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yes, please keep me apprised of your progress there and let me know what you think of the stories.
I will do.
Because, that's... Love me some All-Star.
Hell yeah.
And with that in mind, let's look at a little more All-Star Squadron here. This brings us to the time of Crisis on Infinite Earths, which will pretty much wrap up our discussion of Shazam in the Bronze Age. Okay, so Captain Marvel guest starred in a few more issues of All-Star Squadron, numbers 51... Well, really just 51 and 52. 53 didn't really involve him directly. But this is in November of 84 through January of 85. They're all bannered special crisis crossovers. Issue number 52 is probably the most important of them. A little contingent of All-Stars consisting of the Alan Scott Green Lantern, Johnny Quick, and Liberty Bell. They're knocked off course into Earth S as a result of Crisis on Infinite Earth's goings-on. And once there, they help Cap fight off a legion of the Anti-Monitor's shadow demons who are destroying things all over Earth S. Those shadow demons can even do a dynamite SHAZAM lightning bolt impression. They actually form themselves into a giant black bolt, which then turns Captain Marvel back into Billy Batson. Didn't know they could do that. So that's a little cultural exchange there between representatives of Earth 2 and Earth S, this time on Cap's home turf. And then in issues number 51 and 53, which kind of bookend this story, we get a cool little Golden Age retcon, which is a specialty of Roy Thomas, which he did a lot of in All-Star Squadron. We learn that Mr. Mind originally came from his distant planet in the Earth S universe and tried to find his way to Earth, for all things, to meet his hero, Charlie McCarthy, whom he'd learned about from Earth radio broadcasts. And now you're familiar with Charlie McCarthy, Ian?
The name sounds familiar to me. Where would I know him from?
Well, he had a guest cameo. Well, he was one of many cameos in the Muppet movie.
Oh, okay. All right.
You know Edgar Bergen?
Yes.
Yep. Charlie McCarthy is Edgar Bergen's partner.
Okay. Oh, all right. I get you.
That's right. Mr. Mind traveled across the cosmos to meet a dummy.
You dummy.
But what we learn in All-Star Squadrons number 51 and 53 is that he got knocked off course by the same crisis happenings that sent those three All-Stars to Earth S. So Mr. Mind ended up on Earth 2. And he developed his first Monster Society of Evil, kind of like a proto-Monster Society, on Earth 2 in 1942 using a bunch of obscure DC villains of that era. So we got the Living Gargoyle, we got the Deadly Nightshade, or Ramulus, as he calls himself in this story. We've got the Aztec Priestess Niola, we've got Dr. Fate's enemy, Mr. Who, and eventually they spring the Dummy from prison. There was an actual villain called the Dummy who fought the vigilante, and he actually resembled a living ventriloquist dummy.
Okay.
I think Mr. Mind did that just because he was ticked to learn that Charlie McCarthy was nothing more than a piece of wood. So he compensated for that by adding the Dummy to his gang, and the Dummy rewarded him by backstabbing him and turning the society against him. But then Mr. Mind, in his Mind Tripper space vehicle, found his way through the right dimensional warp and ended up on Earth S. And that's when he founded his more famous Monster Society and touched off that cereal that made Mr. Mind a household name. So, really fun little World War II era story from Roy Thomas, patching together different companies' continuities and even working in some real-world history and culture.
Very cool.
Yep. And the artwork there were provided by Mike Clark and Arvell Jones. And finally, we get to Crisis on Infinite Earths. And this is the end of Earth S as an independent entity, the end of really any sort of historically supported diegetic autonomy for the Fawcett characters. Last time they had a world to call their own and a history to call their own. And the end of the Bronze Age, for our purposes at least, for Captain Marvel. So you'll be hearing excessive details about this on future episodes of the Crisis tapes, of course. So in the interest of brevity here, let's just say that Cap and his friends, including the Lieutenant Marvels and Uncle Marvel, even they got to make appearances in Crisis. They show up in issue number 6, number 7, number 10 during the Villain War, which saw Earth S overrun by supervillains of 5 different Earths, and they popped up in issues 11 and 12 after the Death at the Dawn of Time story that merged retroactively all the multiversal Earths into one. And, interesting note here, I teased this probably a couple of hours ago now, but issue number 7 of Crisis on Infinite Earths contains the first published mention of Fawcett City as the hometown of Captain Marvel and the Marvel family. Throughout all of the Bridwell-written stories of the Bronze Age, especially the ones in World's Finest, New York City was pretty unambiguously the place on Earth S where Captain Marvel called home. But apparently some kind of very late 11-and-a-half-hour editorial decision decided that they lived in a fictitious metropolis called Fawcett City.
Yeah, which again, had you told me that it would have existed since the Golden Age, I would have believed you. But hey, Crisis on Infinite Earths, so go figure.
Everything changes.
Exactly.
Yep. So, and it must have made the rounds. The memo must have gotten around to the different writer-editors because Roy Thomas actually used the term Fawcett City in All-Star Squadron number 52.
Oh, well, there you go.
Where, like, the All-Stars visiting Earth ask Captain Marvel if they have cities like New York, Chicago, Gotham, and Metropolis on his Earth. And Captain Marvel replies, New York and Chicago, sure, but what are those other two you mentioned? Yep.
Very cool.
He's definitely living in Fawcett City in that issue, though. And if you look at all the different Marvel family-related entries in the Who's Who, the definitive directory to the DC Universe, you will see that base of operations is given for all those characters as Fawcett City.
All right.
So they really went all in on that Fawcett City idea just before the whole Earth-esque concept ceased to exist.
Yeah.
I don't know who made that decision or why they made it at that time, but that's the way it went.
Well, I mean, it's a nice, Fawcett's, a historic name and has historic relevance for Captain Marvel, so why not?
Yep, and in a way, I'm kind of disappointed that it's not a part of the current Flashpoint DC, post-Flashpoint DC universe.
Yeah, because he's from Philadelphia in that, correct?
Yeah.
Yep.
If he has to be living in any other city, I personally would have chosen that one first, but... Yeah. As a New Yorker, I do feel bad for you that you don't get to claim Captain Marvel as a fellow native.
You know what? To be entirely honest, I'm 100% with letting Philadelphia have him because we have every other superhero. I mean, seriously, the Marvel Universe, everybody's from New York. I'm all right with giving a hero to somebody else.
That's big of you, Ian.
Yeah, thank you. And we have Kyle Rayner, and that's all that matters.
True that.
Yep.
All right. Do you think we have time for some notes about other media stuff?
Why the heck not?
Okay. Well, I only have a couple here. And besides, I promised you a little bit of closure about that half-remembered Captain Marvel cartoon.
Yes, indeed.
So, there's really only 3 programs to mention here. We've have talked about the SHAZAM live-action series, which ran for 3 seasons on CBS TV, starting in 1974, and the reruns ended their broadcast in fall of 77. Paired up for a time with the ISIS show, featuring characters original to Filmation, in the SHAZAM ISIS Hour. Then we're going to jump ahead a couple of years to a name that lives in infamy among superhero fans, Legends of the Superheroes.
Oh,
These are those 2 live-action specials produced by Hanna-Barbera, both of which were aired on Thursday evenings in January of 1979. I was only a couple of weeks old when these things were aired on NBC television. January 18th and 25th, to be precise. Both of them featured actor Garrett Craig as Captain Marvel, plus Howard Morris as Dr. Sivana, and one of the 2 of them had Laugh-In's Ruth Buzzy as Aunt Minerva.
One of the worst Flash suits I have ever seen in my life.
Is it slightly ill-fitting?
Why, yes, it is. and yet, whoever they have playing Hawkman, must either be a wrestler or a bodybuilder because that man is well built.
Mm. Yeah, you can believe that he has many incarnations worth of physical prowess built into him there.
Yep.
I like the part where he just raises his arms aloft and makes that big hawk cry. It's one of the cooler moments of an otherwise rather strange and unintentionally unhumorous pair of comedy specials.
Yep.
Yeah, if you're wondering, what we're talking about here is you may have heard of the superhero roast, hosted by Ed McMahon. It's been making the bootleg rounds for many years now. I'm pretty sure I've got a VHS copy that I got from Matt somewhere at home, and I actually have watched it more than once.
Oh, wow.
I actually kind of have a soft spot for these things. But there is definitely a Captain Marvel element to them. So it counts as a present in other media. And now, Ian, to answer your earlier question, that show that you saw somewhere at some time.
Yeah.
Which is, I know I've seen maybe one episode that I found on YouTube shortly after I learned that this show existed. I know I never saw it when I was a kid, but it was a Filmation production.
Wow.
So they gave us the live action Shazam back in the 70s, and in the 1981-82 season, they gave us an animated Saturday morning version of Captain Marvel and Friends, which is probably the most faithful version of the character, most faithful to the comics that's ever appeared in any other medium. It borrowed a lot of the supporting cast and even a couple of plot elements directly from some of the old stories.
Wow.
It was part of a show that was called The Kids Superpower Hour with Shazam. And it was kind of a shared time block between two different Filmation concepts, the Shazam series and some animated shorts featuring Hero High, which is about a secondary school that teaches young superheroes how to use their powers.
Sure.
Yep. Also featured a live-action version of those Hero High characters, performed by the same actors who did their voices, as a rock band. So it's kind of like the Super Friends meet the Archies.
Yeah, it was actually originally intended to be a new entry in Filmation's long-running line of Archie cartoon series. And I guess they must have either vetoed it or just were unable to secure that. And it became something else.
So it could have been like Pure Heart the Powerful, the series.
Yeah. Could have very well been. Yep.
Yeah. Well, that's something.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so that it consisted of only 12 Shazam shorts. As you know, Saturday morning shows had short seasons back then.
Right.
And so it was an hour-long thing, Shazam and Hero High. There was even a crossover between the two features in one episode.
Oh, wow.
Like characters from Hero High met the Marvel family and vice versa. So it debuted on NBC on September 12th, 1981 during the 9:30 block. And that happens to be the same Saturday, the very same day, on the very same network that first gave us the Smurfs here in the United States as an animated series. And much more significant to geek culture, Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends.
Yes.
Yep, that premiered on the same day, same network as this Shazam thing we're talking about.
Wow.
Yeah, and if I can go by the small sample I've seen, it really did justice to the old comics. They actually drew C.C. Beck and E. Nelson Bridwell in like caricature form into one of the episodes.
Huh.
And they got people like Bruce Timm and comics great Russ Heath to do some of the layout work.
Wow.
And Paul Dini, fairly new to TV script writing at the time, he actually wrote a couple of scripts for this Shazam cartoon.
Holy cow. That's like how J. Michael Straczynski got his start with Ghostbusters, the animated series.
Oh, right. Yeah, the one based on the old Larry Storch series.
No, I think it might have actually been the real Ghostbusters.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, I knew he'd done some work for He-Man, which was also a Filmation thing.
Right. Yeah. I'm not entirely sure, but I'm almost certain that he did at least some stuff for the real Ghostbusters back in the day.
Yeah. All right.
Yep.
So yeah, the two of them were kind of making their way through the ranks at the same time then.
Yeah. Right. But that's I for the life of me, I can't remember where the hell I found this thing, and whether it was because occasionally when Cartoon Network was first starting out, they would show whatever they could show.
Right. They had an anthology show called Look What We Found, where they just showed random things.
Exactly. So maybe it was there. Maybe it was on USA Network when they used to show it, or maybe it was just one of those random VHSs that my parents used to buy me with like Woody Woodpecker and random other cartoons on it. But I was certainly too young to have watched it when it came out because I wasn't born yet. So.
Yep. And that was the first year, I think, that I actually experienced Saturday morning cartoons. And I know I did not see that Captain Marvel show back then.
Yeah.
I can remember watching something called Trollkins that was on CBS at about the same time. It was like Smurfs meets the Dukes of Hazzard.
Oh, God.
Yeah, so that's like that show of all shows is my earliest Saturday morning memory.
That's hilarious. Yeah. Alrighty.
All right. Well, Ian, I think we finally shot our Bronze Age lightning bolt here.
We most definitely did, man. And what an epic proportion of a spotlight this was, sir.
It might be the longest recording, like the longest single recording we've ever done for CGS.
It's certainly up there. Yeah, I think we may be clocking it at over 4 hours at this point. So yeah, we're gonna have to make a decision on this one, whether we're gonna keep it as one full entity or not. But either way, it's a damn good time.
Well, I wholehearitely agree, Ian, and I'm glad you felt that way, because I thank you for sticking with me to the end here.
Oh, my pleasure. I learned a lot, and it's always good to hear you wax poetic and episodic about characters that I'm unfamiliar with. So good stuff.
Yep. And this is one that I have come to care pretty deeply about, Ian. So
right on.
Glad that I've had this opportunity to wax as much as I did, and thanks for being there to help me wax off.
Oh, wax on, wax off. Wax on, wax off. And speaking of which, credits time.
All right, I'm ready.
Okay.
If you'd like to send us an email, the address is comicgeekspeak@gmail.com. If you'd like to send a voicemail, you can try calling 267-702-6642, although I'm afraid that number may have been disconnected recently. We'll just have to find out. You can like us on Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter, where our handle is @ComicGeekSpeak. You are encouraged to visit thecomicforums.vanillacommunity.com, where you can leave us some feedback about this episode and tell us what thoughts you may have about Captain Marvel in the Bronze Age, Shazam in the Bronze Age, and share whatever reminiscences you may have and any thoughts about the information divulged in this episode. And also talk back about various other episodes of our podcast, or just talk to your fellow CGS fans about stuff not having to do with the show at all. We'd like to give special thanks, as always, to those of you who have donated monetarily to the show in the past. We really appreciate it. The show would not be what it is today without your support. And we are, as always, uniting the world's mightiest heroes, one listener at a time.
Laser beams, opinions like the seasons on everything you read in comics, movies, games, toys, artists, comic geek speak, comic geek speak, comic geek speak, comic geek speak, comic geek, uniting the world's mightiest heroes. This is
That sounds logical.